Hello and welcome back to TalkPAD. I genuinely cannot believe it's been a whole month since we've been on the couch with our lovely co-host, Mr. Guy Brewer. So I'm going to take this fantastic opportunity to welcome you back, the lovely Charlotte McCanch and Mr. Guy Brewer. Guy, I hope you're well, mate. It's lovely to see you. This is your moment. This is the most famous moment of TalkPAD, your introduction. So, Guy, please introduce our fantastic guest.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome especially to Ed Hollands, our amazing guest. And Ed Hollands is from Driven Media, and he is a managing director, I love that term, of many years standing of his company in Derby. He is also a public speaker where he shares the story of his fascinating journey and experiences as a young entrepreneur, his successes and failures, his legendary Dragon's Den encounter and triumph. And in this way, he inspires others of all ages to follow their dreams. He has been a sports coach and a soul trader. There's a story here waiting to be told about dodgeball, I think. Ed has a first-class degree in business studies from the University of Derby. Ed first wowed the nation with his stunning appearance on Dragon's Den, where he was able to present himself as one half of the Northern powerhouse. And he has certainly lived up to the hype, having recently bought out his dragon. In 2016, Ed won the Rising Star Award for Marketing Derby, the inward investment agency for Derby and Derbyshire. In 2019, Ed won the Great British Entrepreneur Awards Midlands Region Creative Industries Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And this year, 2021, he is a finalist in the aforementioned Great British Entrepreneur Awards Midlands Region Service Industries Entrepreneur of the Year. That is a mouthful, I tell you what. And the plaque or the award that you'll get for that must be huge to have that title on it. Anyway, let me tell you, Ed's company was born when he realized the wasted opportunity for using commercial trailers as mobile billboards. His thoughts were that if I had a business, that's where I'd be advertising. And he does. And that's what he did. The idea has since grown into being a successful award-winning large format outdoor advertising business. Truly a positive role model for every business-minded person. Ed Hollands, welcome to TalkPAD.
Thank you, Guy. That was very, very impressive.
He lives up to the hype, right? He lives up to the hype. But first off, right, we've got a list of questions here for you. But look, sack that for a second. Dodgeball. I think this needs more elaboration.
Yep. I did it all off in school, but when I went to university, I turned up to one and basically the first day I did like a day of sport, and dodgeball was like the only one I kept doing, and I still play today for Nottingham Sheriffs.
Wow. So you're dodging the hits and keeping the punches flowing, which is brilliant. So whilst we're talking about that, let's go straight in. Let's talk a little bit about your background, because you're only a young guy as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm only 27, so just over a quarter of a century.
But you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, is that right? You always had this dream of running your own company from a young age.
Yeah, from primary school. I vividly remember probably year 3 or 4, just going, that's what I want to do.
Oh, brilliant. So look, I have got a major question here, right? So you've gone through school and you've always been an entrepreneur, or you've always thought about it. You've gone through school, you've gone through university. You had this light bulb moment whilst waiting at the traffic lights, I believe, and bang, you've run with it and you've gone with it. But how old were you when you found out that you were dyslexic?
So I was diagnosed, or officially diagnosed, probably just before I went to university. But the secondary school I was with, probably about year 10, because if I did multiple choice tests, I got nearly 100% every time. As soon as you make me write a paragraph, that would drop down to sort of 40, 50%. So there was clearly I understood what I was talking about, I just couldn't express it. But my mum knew from primary school that I struggled with words especially, but the primary school refused to get me tested at the time for some reason. But I think it's made me what happened today is I just learned to adapt. I didn't see anything wrong, so I just carried on going.
This is something that we hear a lot, and I'm sure because obviously Guy meets a lot of people with dyslexia, and this is a trait that we've sort of picked up all the way along. So you kind of get driven by the enthusiasm of finding different ways, don't you? And just elaborate a little bit about the school and that background and what made you driven to do what you do today.
I don't really know why I wanted to run my own business, but I've just always had just if I want to do something, I'll do everything I can to achieve it, and I've always seen weird ways of doing things. But I didn't walk properly to start with because I just literally went straight up on my toes, and that was it. Even now, I still revert back to that sometimes. But I don't know what else to say really. It's just I didn't know what I didn't know until they said.
It's interesting to me, if I can just jump in here, because, and I've said this before, I dare say, but I've got to say it again. A lot of people have a hard time in school over dyslexia, and it can compress their confidence and that independent spirit. But that obviously didn't happen to you, or doesn't appear to have happened to you, or did you deal with it? What did you have a bad experience at school? Were all the people really supportive and helpful, or what was it like?
So I think that I always knew I struggled with spelling. So I'd always spell around. So if I couldn't spell a word, I'd always spell around it, which at the time meant that I seemed to do what everyone else was doing. So and I would always put my hand up as I wanted to learn. So I always found a way around. If I couldn't spell a word, Siri wasn't a thing back then, but I would put into Google what I was trying to spell, and 9 times out of 10 it would come up with roughly the word I wanted. And I still can't tell some words apart, but generally if I'm out that stuck, if I speak to Siri will go, oh, it's this word and this is how you spell it. But back then it was just writing stuff and hoping it was the right word a lot of the time.
So did that influence your choice? Sorry, mate. Did that influence your choice, Ed, of your degree at university?
Not really, because in my mind there was only one subject I was going to take, and that was business studies. Because it's always something I wanted to do, and it would help me succeed in later life, hopefully.
So I've got a question that you may not be able to answer, right? But what do you think, you as a person, as an individual, what do you think that you do differently from people who don't have dyslexia?
So I don't know for myself, but I know generally we're quite good at spotting opportunities or ways through things with different paths. And I definitely see that in my life recently, where people have said something and I've just got to the same outcome, but I've gone a completely different way. And it's really hard to explain what my thought process was. It went, that's the problem. Oh, there's a solution. There we go, solved. And that's kind of a lot of the time it's just done on impulse. Because if I get thinking too much, I can just stop.
That is a massive trait, and sometimes I do that. So if I overthink something or try to overthink the information that's presented to me, it all goes terribly wrong. But one of the things that we are very, very good at as a collective is having dyslexia gives you the skill of thinking outside the box and being natural born problem solvers. And I think if anyone asks me that question, what do I do differently from the people around me, is I don't look at the problem, I look at the solution. And I always seem to look at the solution quicker, actually, than other people, because they want to write it down and have a pretty diagram, or they want to go through these multiple steps. And I'm just like, well, why don't you just do that? And that happens a lot. So, you have got that natural born problem solving skill, haven't you?
I think it does come to light when one of my first jobs was at Tesco in like where I grew up, and we were doing, I can't remember if it was Christmas or we were having a store refresh, but for some reason we needed to put like uncooked bread in the back of a van, but it had to stay flat on the trolleys, and because the trolleys were going uphill, they would all slide out. So I said, well, we've got loads of cardboard, why don't we just ram cardboard on the back and it will stop it falling out. And funny enough, it worked. Just because I was using what I had around me to solve a pollution that was annoying.
And yet, there were plenty of people there that could have probably thought the same thing, but for whatever reason, didn't. It is strange. I do find this very, very strange.
I find it really interesting as well. Yeah.
I think I've got to say this. I think that it's something to do with that problem-solving thing that you have to do all the time if you're dyslexic anyway. So you see a problem and you think, let's find a solution. Whereas us neurotypicals, we look at the problem and we think, ooh, I wonder what the solution might be. It's probably something complicated. Let's get the pen and paper out and write a plan. And then we do it in a very kind of logical, sequential, left-brained way, and probably form a committee to get a bit of support because we're not sure. Whereas people with dyslexia, in my experience, just go for it and do it, and they see the solution and it's done.
We're generally held back by you neurotypical people who want to have a whole committee meeting about it.
Yeah, because we've dominated the world, haven't we? We do this thing in maths, don't we, where we say, show you're working. And you get marks for showing you're working. And you think, what's the point of that? You're supposed to have marks for getting the answer right. But no, show you're working. And, you know, it's
well, that was the problem, mate, because I didn't have an answer all the working on my maths.
but what I find talking to people is that that's also old-fashioned now, isn't it? We are in a fast-paced, changeable world where you need people who can solve problems and come up with new ideas and apply them fearlessly.
So this opens up actually a really good question for Ed. So Ed, you're dyslexic, you understand neurodiversity, but let's look at the people around you, right? So obviously, your condition impacts you and also those around you. But what do you do differently, or what do you do to accommodate the needs of people around you that either work with you or work for you, that either have dyslexia or any other neurodiverse condition? Do you have, with your understanding, do you then put in different things in place for those people?
So I've got a small team at the minute, and it's mainly between my head of marketing and myself that I try and work around her because I want her performance to be the best. So we use a Trello board, and it's taken me a while to work out like not everything on the Trello board needs to be spelt perfectly in this perfect order, because she's so good at just taking, I know what you were trying to say, this is how I would say it better, which for me is so much less stress. I just brain dump into there and it comes out, 100 times better. Well, I'd eventually have come out of doing if I'd spent like 10-15 minutes on it. So I think I try and, I'm probably doing the problem solving bit around people. I'm trying to make the problem that I really struggle to spell and put sentences together disappear, because I'll try and make it easy for you.
Yeah. Well, that something else. This is another common trait of dyslexia, that actually is making everything easier for everyone else. But I have someone very similar to you. I have a Charlotte, and I just literally write everything down, and then Charlotte interprets it. And actually, I'm the creative one, and Charlotte is the one that then puts everything in an order of some recognition that everyone else can kind of see it. I want to ask you a little bit about your motivational speaking, because obviously it's a circuit that I work in as well. What is your message? So when you go into into an event or into an organization, what is it that you talk about? Is it about dyslexia? Is it about your journey through business? Is it about your struggle? What is your message?
Generally, I don't mention dyslexia at all. It's just, where I started, what I did to have the idea for Driven Media, Dragon's Den, the experience, the working with Jenny and other investors, haven't quite yet spoken about the buyout and how that happened. But it is just my story from start to finish. What I've learned. I don't think really people understand dyslexia. If you've got dyslexia, it's great, but if you don't, I think they see it as irrelevant. They don't understand that sometimes it's a lot harder than it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think as well for you, which is what I love, the TalkPAD podcast is all about talking positively about dyslexia, because your ambition and your drive just shines through, even though we're sitting on a screen at the moment, of course, but you don't seem to have any thoughts that it's been a hinder for you. Instead, it's been an inspiration to do better and see solutions out of problems quicker than everybody else. And I love that. So what do you think you would give a message to people who may be struggling in school and maybe are not so positive about their dyslexia? What would your message be to those people that are listening?
Especially when I set up Driven Media, I did struggle with it because obviously spelling and word, how you structure emails and things is important. But find ways that work for you. Everyone's different. So there are tools now that help you be more productive or better. So there's Dragon or something that you can, if you struggle to put things down on writing, you can speak it right for you, or puts in a Word document. There are screen readers if you struggle to read quickly. I know my wife she's dyslexic as well, and she really struggles to read. So she needs complete distraction free if she's going to read. But the way around it is if I read it to her, she understands it so much better anyway, a lot of the time.
That's interesting, actually, because we've had a couple of members on here now, haven't we, Guy, that have used equipment available to them, such as screen readers.
Well, do you know what, folks? Here's the thing, right? The point of it is that it doesn't get rid of dyslexia, but it saves time, because you can spend ages reading and rereading stuff. This is my experience talking to people. They say they spend all this time reading it, trying to soak in what it's actually saying. Takes forever. And likewise, when you're writing something, you've got to keep checking it, because the grammar Nazis out there will criticize you. And I hear it all the time. And you bully other people over spelling and things like that. And so this assistive software, it just saves all this time. And as Ed says, if you have it read to you, then it sinks in so much more quickly. And interestingly, I met an astrophysicist once with dyslexia, and what he used to do is he'd do his experiments all day long, and then he would open up his laptop and use the Dragon Dictate to outpour all his thoughts and ideas, because once he got them out of his head onto the screen, then he can fiddle around with his laptop and edit it all. Saved him a huge amount of time. So but they're tools, aren't they? You've got to find the right purpose for them. But since I've got the floor, as it were, let me ask you this thing, Ed. Now, if you do inspirational speaking, you're not mentioned to people that you're dyslexic, and I didn't find anything on the internet that you were dyslexic. And similarly with Mark Wright, who we had on previously, who had never mentioned it before. And similarly with Andy Tucker, it's such a hidden thing. And yet there are people in schools and here and there who are tormented by it. So is it something you might mention in the future?
Ooh.
I think I'll try to, yeah. Depending on the audience. I think for school children, absolutely, because you don't know what the story is. But it's finding that relevance, I think, is at what point can you bring it in?
I always figured that I was called a thick kid at school. So I use it in all my books. But that's because it is relevant to my talk as well. So, it's about, for me, it's not saying, look, I'm dyslexic, look what I've got. It's about saying, actually, look what I've achieved. And I've done all this. Oh, and by the way, I was actually once told that I would never achieve anything because I'm dyslexic. So that's the reason. It does generally have an impact. But what would you say taking it away from everything, right? The conversation we're having today, the Dragon's Den, whatever, right? What do you think is your key skill to success?
I think I just don't stop. Like if I see an opportunity, I'm going to go for it. It doesn't matter what people say. I believe it's going to work. So until I believe it's not going to work, it's going to work.
Yes.
I don't know if that's dyslexia or just.
I was just about to ask Guy, is that a dyslexic trait, Guy?
Well, I don't know. I think it's so difficult, isn't it? Because when you talk to people, when we have this talk, it's about dyslexia. There's so much dyslexia stuff, but we are all made up of so many different facets, aren't we? And our upbringing, our background, and our culture, and all this sort of thing. And what our families are like, and our friends. So it might be that it's a dyslexic thing, but it could be any of all those other things, couldn't it? And people have strong faith and all this sort of thing. So, but it's fascinating, isn't it, that it's dyslexia is a disability, but it doesn't hold lots of people back, does it? And it shows, doesn't it? If you've got that drive and determination, then there are no barriers in this world that can be in your way.
It's using it to your advantage. I think if you can figure out how to use it to make do what you want to do better, that's the key. If you struggle using it or getting around it or even just getting through it, I think that's the difference. I think with a lot of people is that I've got dyslexia. By the time I'd already basically figured out what I needed to succeed.
Yeah.
I think that transition or the working around it, I think that is the key.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it is right. Now, another question I've got for you is, you don't obviously talk about dyslexia openly, and that's cool. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that I don't talk about openly. But when is it that you actually do tell people that you're dyslexic? Is there a point where you go, actually, I'm going to tell this person now because it's relevant?
I generally make a joke of it. So if emails is the one place where it comes across, because especially if I've written something quickly and the spell check hasn't been quick enough, it'll send off an email and it'll say silly stuff or there's words missing. That's when I make a joke of it. If they've replied and go, I'm not quite sure. Oh, sorry, my dyslexia got the best of me. Like a runaway joke.
Yeah.
I don't try and make it, because I'm in media, so it's like what we put out on the trucks needs to be, Grammy Nazi type perfect. And I think that's things that's got to be. I'm quite conscious of, but I can't, especially on social media, driven media stuff, make those errors.
Yeah.
So it's harder for me to admit it.
So do you employ someone to do that stuff for you?
Now I've got Selena, who's looking after my marketing. She does an awful lot of the social media, and even if I'm going to post something on LinkedIn, she will just make sure that what I'm saying is actually what's on the paper. Because I'll only read something once. I struggle to read things multiple times because it just blurs together after a while.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I'm laughing because I have to proofread everything that Jamie puts out. Otherwise, I don't think a lot of people would be able to read it and understand what he actually wants to say. So yeah, it's building that support network and realizing that is not your strength. It's not a disadvantage. It's just not a strength that you're familiar, that you're good at, and it's realizing that, isn't it? And I think that message is really coming across from you today. That realize that is actually not your strength, and get somebody else to help you, or look over it. Outsource. Yeah.
Outsource. So listen, Ed, one last question for you, right? Because you're super successful, you're a motivational speaker, you've got a very successful business. You've bought out your investors, you're doing what you want to do. The stories just keep rolling in. You play dodgeball, which is awesome. But what is the one thing out of all of that? What is the one thing that matters to you most?
I think it depends what stage you ask me. Like now, what matters to me is, basically my words. If I say we're going to do something, we do it. Whereas if you'd asked me, especially mid-COVID, it was just, I've got to survive no matter the cost. And I think COVID's done a lot of that, because it's completely changed relationships. And we work in office, now work at home, and now I've got to fit in my work around kids and life. Now I'm much more of, especially in our industry, it's not got the best reputation, or it didn't when I started. So for me, it is, if we say we're going to do it, or I say I'm going to do it, it happens. And it's harder the bigger you grow, because there is communication issues, and just it takes a little bit longer to do everything.
No, good answer. Good answer. Listen, at some point we have to end the show, right? So it's at this point that I always come to my co-hosts, because I'm not going to lie, Ed, shutting me up is the difficulty, right? So I'm going to fly over to Charlotte and say, Charlotte, have you got anything else for the lovely?
Not at the moment. I'm going to have a little think, and I'll pass it over to Guy for now.
Yes, I have some questions prepared, Ed. And so, firstly, I'd like to say, as an observation, I love the fact you've got a whiteboard in the background, because they are great things for putting ideas on and making them visual, getting them out of your head and doing something with them. So good work. But what I want to know is, what are the advantages that you have over your competitors, do you think?
In terms of with dyslexia, or as the business?
Just, what is it? Because, it may be a dyslexia thing, it may be something else completely. I just wondered what you felt made you different from people in the same line of work.
So everything we do is about accountability. So all of our trailers are tracked. We're very open about the data. So every week, advertisers get a report that basically says, truck A did very well, truck B did nothing. Because it's right there in black and white whether the trailers are performing or not. And I think that's what we do really, really well. Aside from the social media, which is, we're the only ones really shouting about the medium and the campaigns. But I think the data that we can provide advertisers is just it's something that if someone came along and it would take them time to develop the data and get the data out.
You see, that's really interesting, because I think that might be a slightly dyslexic thing, because the people that I talk to with dyslexia and other associated conditions are invariably incredibly thorough in what they do. So that might mean that it takes them ages to do the job that they want to do, and their manager may not like that. But thoroughness is a thing. Also, integrity, wanting to do a good job because that's the right thing to do, comes across hugely as well. So who knows, you might be driven by dyslexia as well as everything else.
Well, I think we'll have to see in the future, what developments we produce, and see where they lead.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, Ed, because I know that they kind of refused to get you tested when you were in school. And what would you like to see as changes in the school system? Just a brief sort of, to be able to help people so they don't struggle and they can sort of have the same inspiration and make it into something positive like you have.
I think that's tricky, because it's very, very easy to get labelled, and it's not quite the right thing. I did struggle in primary school, but I think in that switch from year 6 to 7, is I kind of worked out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, because I was really good at maths and science. English let me down. All I needed in English was a C. That was what I was aiming for. So I think it's just supporting them in what they want to do, because you can try and get me to a spelling test, but I'm not going to do it, because I just didn't even bother trying, because I knew even if I tried, I wasn't going to do it. And I think I don't think dyslexia is very good at academic things, especially if it's around writing. So I think it's offering them different ways to express things, like coursework. As you get older, lots of people some people excel at coursework, and some people or just hate it. So it's probably offering those different ways of excelling in the field you're trying to study in.
A great answer. I think it's an excellent way of looking at it, to see all your strengths and get support in those, rather than focusing on being labeled as something. And I think that's a great answer. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, we have to end the show. So I want to say a massive thank you to, of course, the wonderful Mrs. McCann, the fantastic Mr. Guy Brewer, but most of all, Ed, thank you so much for giving up your time, coming along with us today, talking about your story, talking about a subject that you don't talk about on a common basis. But we appreciate you stepping outside the box on that. And mate, I wish you all the very best of success. I know you're going to win the GB Entrepreneur Awards when we're there, because I feel that we're going to win it as well, but who knows? We'll have another conversation after that. But listen, mate, massive thank you from all of us and everybody listening. We think you're an absolute star, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here as well.
So that's it. We have to end the show, and let's be honest, what a show it's been. So we have had a superstar on the show this month, and I cannot wait to see who is going to be our guest in the seat next month. So for you need to stay tuned. For us, it's goodbye for now. Take care. Goodbye. Stay safe.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.